My sister got a brand new car for graduation, but my gift shocked everyone. What should have been a celebration of family and achievement turned into the moment my entire life fractured. A gleaming symbol of love for her, for me, a stark, cold box that revealed a truth I could no longer ignore. This is not a story about jealousy. It's a story about the invisible child, the weight of silence, and the single moment you realized you've been living a lie in your own home. If you understand what it means to be the one who holds everything together while feeling completely alone, stay with me. Hit subscribe, because this story unfolds in layers of pain, revelation, and a strength I never knew I had. My name is Cassandra. I'm 42 years old now, and the echoes of that day still whisper in quiet rooms. But to understand the rupture, you have to understand the slow, steady suffocation that came before it. The prison built not with bars, but with grateful smiles and weary sighs. The week of my sister Alara's graduation was a symphony of controlled chaos, a composition I knew by heart. I was the silent conductor, the one who ensured every instrument was tuned, every sheet of music in place, while everyone else prepared to take the stage. The air in our suburban home hummed with a frantic, glittering energy that belonged entirely to her. Alara, 3 years my junior, floated through the halls with the serene assurance of a crown princess awaiting her coronation. You could see it in the way our mother, Lydia, smoothed her gown with trembling, proud hands, in the way our father, Robert, cleared his throat with uncharacteristic emotion during dinner toast rehearsals. And me? I was in the wings, dusting the unseen corners. I coordinated the caterer my parents could barely afford, negotiated with the rental company for the tent when the deposit fell short, and quietly covered the difference from my own meager savings, the just-in-case fund I'd scraped together waiting tables late after college. It was a reflex, honed over a lifetime. If a gap appeared, Cassandra filled it. No discussion, no fanfare. The expectation was a layer of skin I wore. "Kaz, honey, you're so good at this," Mom would say, handing me another list without meeting my eyes. Her praise was a soft, burdensome blanket. "I don't know what we would do without your practical mind." Practical. It was the word that had defined me since childhood. Where Alara was brilliant and radiant, I was steady and capable. Where my younger brother, Jamie, was spirited and free, I was mature and reliable. My role was the foundation, poured and set in concrete, so the more beautiful, more fragile structures above could soar. The financial strain was a taut wire thrumming beneath the surface of every conversation that week. I heard the hushed, tense exchanges late at night through my bedroom floor, phrases like second mortgage, balloon payment, and a sharp hissed, "It's for her future, Robert." My father, a quiet man whose dreams had been sanded down by decades of middle management, carried a new, grim set to his jaw. A wild, almost desperate hope had replaced his usual weary resignation. This gift for Alara wasn't just a present. It was a statement, a massive, risky investment in the child they believed would justify every sacrifice. I tried not to dwell on it. Dwelling led to questions, and questions were a luxury my role didn't afford. Instead, I focused on the tangible, starching tablecloths, arranging lilies, ensuring Jamie's suit was pressed. He was 16, blissfully adrift in his own world of video games and skateboards, utterly untouched by the fiscal tremors shaking the house. He'd smirk at Alara's dramatics and shoot me a look that said, "Can you believe this circus?" But he never offered to help carry the tent poles. Why would he? No one ever asked him to. The ceremony was a blur of green robes and proud tears. I watched Alara cross the stage, her smile luminous, and felt a complex ache that wasn't quite envy. It was the ache of witnessing a destiny so clearly acknowledged, so publicly celebrated, while my own milestones, my own graduation, my promotion at the small graphic design firm, had been met with warm, distracted pats on the back. "That's our Cass," Dad had said, always landing on her feet. The implication was clear. She doesn't need us to catch her. The party back home was a triumph. The tent I'd secured billowed gracefully in the backyard. The food I'd ordered was a hit. Laughter and music swelled, a tribute to Alara's bright future. I circulated with a tray of canapes, a ghost in my own life, listening to the mythology of my sister being woven in real time by aunts and uncles. "So talented! Going to change the world! You must be so proud!" And then the air changed. The crowd hushed, gathering around my parents and Alara near the oak tree. A nervous, giddy energy crackled. My father produced a large ribbon-wrapped box from behind the tree. Not a small box, a big, flat one. My mother's hands were clasped to her chest, tears streaming freely. "For our shining star," Dad boomed, his voice thick. "For all the hard work and the incredible future ahead." Alara's hands fluttered to her mouth as she tore the paper. Nestled inside the box wasn't a set of keys. It was a gleaming, scale-model luxury sedan, the exact model, color, and trim she'd sighingly pointed out in magazines for months. A collective, "Ooh!" swept through the crowd. "The real one," Mom cried, unable to contain herself, "is waiting at the dealership. We pick it up Monday." The applause was thunderous. Alara shrieked, throwing her arms around them both. The picture of a dream fulfilled. Cameras flashed, capturing the perfect family moment. The cost of it, the staggering, reckless cost, slammed into my gut. The second mortgage, the drained savings, the whispered fights. It was all for this. For her. The math of their love was suddenly, brutally clear. I felt myself receding, the sounds of the party becoming muffled, as if I were submerged in deep water. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped, frantic thing. And then, my father's eyes found me in the crowd. The proud tears for Alara softened into something else, a kind of brisk, familiar affection. He reached down beside the patio chair and picked up a small, rectangular gift box wrapped in the same paper. "We didn't forget you, of course, Cassandra," he said, his voice shifting to a warmer, more casual tone. The crowd's attention, still buzzing from the car reveal, turned to me with polite, secondary interest. "This is for you, for everything you do." The box was light in my hands. Insultingly light. The paper tore easily. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of white tissue, was not jewelry, not a gift card, not a book. It was a brand new, premium, leather-bound planner. A family hub organizer, to be exact. Emblazoned on the front in gold foil were the words, "The glue that holds us all together." My mother beamed. "We know how much you manage for everyone, sweetheart. All the schedules, the appointments, the reminders. We thought this would help you, keep doing what you're so wonderful at. It even has a section for household budgets and grocery lists." The world did not go silent. It became painfully, excruciatingly loud. The crinkle of the tissue paper was a roar. The distant chirp of a bird was a shriek. I stared at the planner, at the cheesy, gilded title. The glue. Not a person. Not a daughter with her own dreams. A function? An adhesive? My father nodded, satisfied. "You're so good at the details, Cass. The practical stuff. This will make it easier for you to help your mother while Alara gets settled into her new internship in the city." And there it was. The future. Mapped out in a single sentence. Alara would soar in the city with her new car and her brilliant career. I would stay. I would plan. I would hold. I would be the glue. I looked from my father's expectant face to my mother's proud smile, to Alara's distracted, blissful expression as she admired her model car again, to Jamie's faint, confused frown. In that suspended moment, I saw the rest of my life with horrifying clarity, a series of boxes, each one smaller than the last, until I disappeared into the practical, reliable, invisible ether. A coldness seeped into my bones, a calm so deep it felt like the end of something. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply closed the lid of the box with a soft, final click. "Thank you," I heard myself say, my voice is stranger's, flat and pleasant. It's very thoughtful. I set the box down carefully on the patio table beside a half-empty punch bowl. The party's energy surged back around Alara, already moving on. I turned and walked calmly through the crowd, past the tent, through the side gate, and into the quiet of the alley behind our house. My feet kept moving, one in front of the other, down the alley, onto the sidewalk, toward the bus stop. I had my purse, I had my keys, I had nothing else. I was 3 blocks away when my phone began to vibrate in my hand. I looked at the screen. Mom. Her name pulsed with a lifetime of unspoken demands. The shaking in my hands wasn't from sadness anymore. It was from the sheer, terrifying force of a dam breaking. I answered. Her voice was sharp, frayed at the edges with annoyance. Cassandra, where did you go? People are asking for more napkins. Come back right now. I looked down the long, tree-lined street away from the house toward a future I did not yet see. The glue had just decided to stop sticking. I'm not coming back, Mom, I said, my voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. You have 1 hour to figure out where the napkins are. And I hung up. The world did not end. The sky did not fall. I kept walking. But the true shock, the real danger, wasn't my walking away. It was what my family had hidden to make Alara's dream come true, and the devastating consequences that were already in motion, waiting for the one person who always cleaned up the mess to finally be gone. The bus ride was a blur of passing streetlights and the low murmur of strangers' conversations. I sat by the window, the leather planner heavy in my lap despite its physical lightness. The gold lettering gleamed mockingly in the intermittent light. The glue that holds us all together. Each word was a tiny brand. I traced them with a numb finger, remembering the Christmas I'd gotten a similar gift, a bulky family-sized first aid kit, because you're so good in a crisis, Cass. Birthdays marked with practical, weightless things, a premium label maker, a subscription to a meal prep service, a book on organizational psychology. They were never for me. They were accessories for the role I played in their lives. I got off downtown, not at my apartment. I couldn't face those 4 quiet walls yet. The silence there would feel like an accusation, a void I was supposed to fill with more planning, more organizing. Instead, I walked. The city at night was different, not the curated, sun-drenched version I navigated on errands for my mother, but something alive and indifferent. It didn't need my glue. It just was. My phone buzzed again, a persistent, angry insect in my purse. Dad, Mom, Jamie, Mom, Mom. The screen lit up with a fury that felt palpable through the leather. I didn't silence it. I watched it dance on the pavement as I held it in my hand, the vibrations traveling up my arm. It was the sound of the world I'd left behind, trying to reel its foundation back in. On the 7th call, I answered. It was my father this time, his voice strained, the public joviality completely stripped away. Cassandra, this isn't funny. Your mother is upset. You embarrassed her in front of everyone. Where are you? The question was about location, not state of being. He didn't ask why. He never did. I'm not coming home tonight, Dad. Don't be ridiculous. Of course you are. We have things to discuss. The party isn't over. It is for me, I said, my voice still eerily calm. I'm sure you and Mom can manage the napkins and the leftover cake and the tent rental return tomorrow. There was a long pause. I could hear the party in the background. Alara's laugh, a peal of pure delight. The sound was a knife twist. He lowered his voice, the words coming out in a rushed, tense whisper. Cassandra, you don't understand. Things are
delicate right now. We need you here. We need everything to go smoothly. Delicate. The word hung between us, charged with all the unsaid financial terror I'd overheard. My absence was a complication in their meticulously constructed house of cards plan. I was the steady hand that was supposed to keep et al. From trembling. "What did you do, Dad?" I asked, quietly, the pieces beginning to click into a horrifying picture. For the car. What did you actually do?
The silence on the other end was colder than the night air. It was a confession. Then the line went dead. He'd hung up. That sudden disconnect, that refusal to answer, told me more than any explanation ever could. The gift of the planner wasn't just an insult. It was a distraction, a shiny, guilt-ridden pacifier for the one person who might ask the wrong questions, who might look too closely at the books they could no longer balance. I finally made it to my apartment as the first hint of dawn bruised the sky. The space, usually a tidy refuge, felt alien. It was filled with the ghosts of my other life, a stack of my mother's medical brochures I was supposed to sort, a bag of Jamie's sports gear I'd promised to mend, a notepad with a grocery list for the week's family dinners. I moved through the rooms like a curator in a museum of my own subjugation, collecting each item and depositing it into a large trash bag. The physical act was cathartic. With each item discarded, a thread of that old obligation snapped. I slept fitfully, haunted not by nightmares, but by spreadsheets, endless columns of numbers bleeding red, my father's anxious face, my mother's pleading eyes. When I woke, the sun was high and my phone was a graveyard of missed calls and text messages. The tone had shifted. The anger was still there, but it was now frayed with a new panicked edge. Mom, 9:14 a.m. Cass, please call me. Your father is very upset. Mom, 10:32 a.m. We need to talk about the car paperwork. There's a problem with the insurance verification. You're so much better at these things. Alara, 11:05 a.m. WTF, Cass? Mom's crying. Did you really just bail because you're jealous? Grow up. I need a ride to the dealership at 3. I deleted them all. Then I blocked their numbers. The action was terrifying, a severing of an umbilical cord I hadn't known was still attached. A primal fear rose in my throat. What if something happens? What if they need me? But the stronger, newer voice whispered back, they only need the function you provide, not you. The next few days were a strange, hollow freedom. I went to work at the design firm, losing myself in the clean logic of layouts and color palettes. My boss, a kind, no-nonsense woman named Margot, took one look at my face on Monday morning and simply said, "Rough weekend?" When I nodded, she added, "Good. Sometimes they need to be rough to clear the debris." She didn't ask for details. It was the first time someone had acknowledged my state without immediately trying to fix it or use it. I didn't go home. I didn't call. But the universe of my family had its own gravity, and news filtered in through the only unblocked channel I'd forgotten, my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who was friends with my mother's book club buddy. She called me Wednesday evening, her voice crackling with concern and thinly veiled gossip. "Cassandra, dear, I hope you're well. Your mother, well, she's in a state. I heard from Barbara that there was quite the scene at the dealership, something about the car not being ready. And your father, he's been at the bank every day this week. Barbara's husband works there, you know. He said it's not looking good." The scene at the dealership unfolded in my mind with cruel clarity. Alara, expecting to drive off the lot in her shiny new dream, met with confusion, paperwork snafus, and ultimately refusal. My parents' desperate gamble, the second mortgage or whatever they'd leveraged, had clearly hit a wall. The foundation was cracking, and I wasn't there with the spackle. A part of me, the conditioned, dutiful part, ached to rush in.
to make the calls, smooth the ruffled feathers at the dealership, decipher the fine print. But a larger, harder part had solidified. I thanked Mrs. Gable and told her I was taking some personal time. She sighed, a sound full of unspoken judgment, and hung up. Friday night, the gravity proved too strong. There was a pounding on my apartment door, not the polite knock of a neighbor, but a frantic, uneven hammering. I looked through the peephole. Jamie stood there, his face pale, his usual careless posture rigid with the fear I'd never seen in him. He was alone. I opened the door. He didn't greet me. His words tumbled out in a breathless rush. "Cass, you have to come. It's Dad. He collapsed. At the bank. They took him to St. Vincent's. Mom's a mess. Alara's useless. They're asking about papers and passwords, and I don't know anything." The world tilted. All my cold resolve, my careful distance, threatened to vaporize. This was the real crisis, the one the first aid kit and the planner could never fix. The fear in Jamie's eyes was genuine, a child's terror. For a second, I was back in my role, the problem solver, the rock. But then I saw it. Behind the fear, just a flicker, the assumption, the surety that of course I would come, that I would handle it, that his job was just to deliver the message and let the glue work its magic. "Is he conscious?" I asked, my voice clinical. "What? I think so. Mom said it was stress. They think it's his heart. Cass, come on." "Call an ambulance if you need an ambulance, Jamie. Manage the situation. You're 16, not 6. He stared at me as if I'd spoken in another language. "Manage it? How? I can't. Mom is crying. Alara's on the phone with her friends having a meltdown about her car. I don't know what to do." For the first time in his life, the weight of the chaos had landed on his shoulders and he was buckling under it. He had never learned how to carry it because I had always carried it for him. The injustice of it burned, but so did a grim sense of vindication. "You'll figure it out," I said, and I started to close the door. He shoved his foot in the jam, his expression shifting from fear to anger. "You're really the selfish? Dad could be dying." "And if he is," I said, meeting his gaze, holding it, "then you all should have thought about that before you decided I was only good for scheduling and sponges and holding your lives together while you forgot I had one of my own." I pushed the door gently against his foot until he pulled it back. The last thing I saw was his stunned, betrayed face before the latch clicked shut. I slid down against the door, my own heart pounding a violent rhythm against my ribs. The guilt was a tidal wave, threatening to drown me. I could go. I should go. What kind of person abandons their family at a hospital? But then I heard my father's voice from the graduation party, so full of pride for Alara, so casually expectant of me. I saw the planner. I felt the lifetime of being the afterthought, the utility. If I went now, nothing would change. I would be sucked back into the vortex, responsible for the medical bills, the emotional labor, the fallout of their reckless choices. My father's collapse wasn't my fault. It was the culmination of a pressure I had refused to absorb anymore. I didn't go to the hospital. I sat on my floor and weathered the storm of my own conscience. An hour later, my phone, connected to Wi-Fi, buzzed with an email. It was from my mother's email address, but the phrasing was all Alara. Dramatic, accusatory, self-absorbed. "Cassandra, if you're checking this, you know Dad is in the hospital. It's a stress-induced episode. The doctor says he'll be okay but needs rest. But that's not why I'm writing. The bank is freezing some accounts. There are liens on the house Mom and Dad didn't tell us about. The car deal fell through because the down payment was pulled from some account that's now empty. No one will tell me what's going on. Dad mumbled something about a bridge loan and a private investor before they gave him the sedative. What did you do? Did you know about this? You handle all their stuff. How could you let this happen?" The accusation took my breath away. Even in disaster, the narrative was twisting. How could you let this happen? My responsibility was so ingrained that in their minds, their financial ruin was my failure to prevent it. The private investor phrase sent a chill down my spine. That wasn't a bank term. That sounded desperate. That sounded dangerous. I closed the laptop. The walls of my apartment felt thinner. The problem was no longer at a distance. It was seeping through the digital walls, a toxic smoke seeking its familiar container. I had walked away from the party, but the true consequences of my family's choices were only beginning to detonate. And the most terrifying part was the gnawing certainty that the private investor wasn't just a faceless entity. It was someone who expected to be paid back with interest. And with my father in a hospital bed and their finances in ruins, I had a sickening feeling about who that investor would come looking for next.
Silence is a loud thing when you're waiting for a storm. For 3 days after Jamie's visit and Alara's email, I existed in a state of suspended dread. I went to work, I ate, I slept in fractured bursts, but my mind was a spinning compass needle pointing toward a threat I couldn't yet see. I didn't call the hospital, I didn't unblock their numbers, but I checked the local news online every few hours with a knot in my stomach, half expecting to see my family's name in a story about fraud or bankruptcy. It was on the 4th day that the storm made landfall. I was leaving my apartment building after work, the autumn air sharp with the smell of fallen leaves and impending rain, when I saw him. A man leaned against a sleek black sedan parked directly across from the building's entrance. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't smoking. He was just watching the door. He wore a dark, expensive-looking coat, and his posture was one of relaxed patience that felt utterly predatory. Our eyes met as I stepped onto the sidewalk. He didn't smile. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, as if confirming my identity. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to go back inside, to call the police. But on what grounds? A man was looking at me. I forced my feet to move, turning left toward the bus stop, my pulse hammering in my ears. I heard the soft thunk of a car door closing, then the smooth purr of an engine rolling slowly alongside me. The passenger window slid down. Cassandra. He knew my name. His voice was calm, mid-range, devoid of menace, and therefore all the more terrifying. I kept walking, staring straight ahead. "I don't have any money." A low, humorless chuckle. "I'm not a mugger, Miss Reed. My name is Victor Salvatore. I'm an associate of the individual who provided a bridging loan to your father, Robert Reed. I believe you and I need to have a conversation about the restructuring of that debt." The words were corporate, clean. They did nothing to mask the cold reality beneath them. Private investor, this was him, or rather, this was his collector. "I have nothing to do with my father's finances," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "See, that's the information I had as well," Victor said, the car keeping perfect pace with my hurried steps. "The reliable daughter, the practical one, handles the books, pays the bills, keeps the ship afloat. But then you jumped ship, quite publicly, I'm told. That creates a problem. The primary signatory is in the hospital, stressed and frankly insolvent. The co-signatory, your mother, has no independent income stream. The intended beneficiary, your sister, is an entitled child with no assets. That leaves you." I stopped walking then, turning to face the window. His face was all angles, clean-shaven, with eyes the color of wet slate. He looked like a lawyer or a high-end funeral director. "Leaves me for what? I didn't sign anything." "No, you didn't. Legally, you're in the clear. We're not barbarians." He said it with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But this isn't a courtroom, Miss Reed. This is about recourse.
Your father borrowed a significant sum against not just the house, but against future earnings, against the stability of his household. Stability you provided. You were a silent part of the collateral. Your sudden departure devalued the asset. The world seemed to shrink to the space between his car and me. I had been collateral. My quiet, dependable presence had been factored into a loan shark's risk assessment. The sheer, dehumanizing calculation of it stole my breath. "What do you want?" The question was a whisper. "A discussion. Get in the car, or we can have it here on the street. I'm indifferent, but the subject matter is sensitive for public consumption." The threat was elegant, unspoken. I thought of my father, frail in a hospital bed, of my mother, clueless and panicking, of the lien on the house. This man held the strings that could make it all unravel catastrophically. My newfound freedom felt like a brittle shell. With a leaden heart, I walked around the front of the car and opened the passenger door. The interior smelled of leather and faint cologne. He drove smoothly, turning away from my neighborhood toward the industrial riverfront. He didn't speak for several minutes, letting the tension coil tight in the quiet space.
"Your father came to us 8 months ago," he began, as if starting a business presentation. "He needed a substantial down payment for a vehicle, a show of faith for a daughter he believed was destined for greatness. Banks were hesitant, given his debt-to-income ratio. We provided a solution. A short-term loan, with the family home as primary security, and a gentleman's agreement regarding household continuity." "A gentleman's agreement," I repeated flatly. "A recognition that the loan's viability was predicated on the family unit remaining functional, with its operational manager in place. Your departure signals dysfunction. It increases our risk. We need to mitigate that risk. I'm not going back." The words were firm, final. "I'm not asking you to. That would be inefficient. The dynamic is broken." He glanced at me. "What I am proposing is a new arrangement. You have a job. You have, I assume, some savings. You have a skill set. Organization, management, discretion. My employer has various enterprises that often require administrative finesse, accounts that need gentle reconciliation, clients who need polite but firm reminders." Ice water flooded my veins. He wasn't asking for a one-time payment. He was offering me a job, to work off my father's debt by doing for a criminal what I had done for my family, managing the messy details, being the reliable, invisible glue. "You're out of your mind," I breathed. "Am I?" He pulled the car into a deserted parking lot overlooking the dark, choppy river. He put it in park and turned fully toward me. "Consider the alternative. We call the loan due immediately. We foreclose on the house. Your father's medical crisis becomes a financial scandal. Your sister's bright future is a joke. Your mother has nowhere to go. And you," he tilted his head, "you get to live with your principled stand while your family is destroyed. You'll tell yourself it was their fault, and you'll be right. But you'll still see your mother's face in your dreams every night." He was a craftsman, expertly applying pressure to the exact fault lines of my guilt and my love, fractured as they were. "What kind of work?" I heard myself ask, the question a betrayal of everything I'd just fought for. "Nothing violent. Nothing you couldn't explain away as freelance bookkeeping. You'd be an independent contractor. We'd start small, a few hours a week. The compensation would be applied directly to the interest on your father's loan, slowing the bleed. It's a kindness, really, a chance for you to clean up the mess from a safe distance." The twisted logic of it was monstrous. He was offering me a way to be the family glue without having to live with them, to serve my sentence in a different prison. And if I say no, if I go to the police? He smiled then, a real one.
chilling in its warmth. With what, Cassandra? I have threatened nothing. I have offered you employment. Your father willingly entered into a legally ambiguous private loan. You would be dragging your already vulnerable family through a public, humiliating, and ultimately futile legal process. And my employer does not appreciate publicity. He let that hang in the air before adding softly, think about it. You have 48 hours. A man will call you at this number. He handed me a plain white business card with only a phone number printed in stark black ink. Don't use your personal phone. Buy a burner. Be smart. You're good at that. He drove me back to my apartment in silence. I got out, the card burning a hole in my palm. He didn't drive away immediately. He watched me walk to the door, a silent reminder that my movements were now observed. Inside, I collapsed. The walls of my hard-won sanctuary felt like a cage with glass bars. I had walked away from one set of expectations only to be ensnared by another, far more dangerous set. Victor Salvatore had not just found me. He had mapped the entire landscape of my life, my family's weaknesses, my own conflicted psyche. He knew which levers to pull. I spent a sleepless night, pacing, the card on my kitchen table like a poisonous insect. The moral calculus was unbearable. Serve a criminal to save the family that devalued me? Or let them face the consequences of their own actions and bear the eternal guilt of their ruin? As dawn broke, gritty and gray, I made a decision. Not the final one, but the first tactical one. I would not be a passive pawn. I needed information. I needed to know exactly what my father had done. I needed leverage. I unblocked one number, Jamie's. He answered on the first ring, his voice raw with sleeplessness and a new, grim maturity. "Cass, is Dad awake? Coherent?" A pause. "Yeah, he got home yesterday. He's quiet, like a ghost. The bank called again this morning. Mom's in the shower crying." "I need you to do something for me, Jamie. And you can't tell anyone. Not Mom, not Alara, especially not Dad." "What?" The wariness in his voice was a testament to how much had changed. In Dad's home office, the locked filing cabinet in the corner, the key is in the hollowed-out spine of the old dictionary on the top shelf. I need you to open it. Find the file for any loan paperwork from the last year that doesn't look like it's from a bank. Take pictures of every page with your phone and send them to me. Silence, then a shaky breath. "Cass, what did he do?" "Something stupid for Alara. And now it's threatening all of you. I'm trying to help, but I can't do it from inside. I need to see what we're dealing with. Can you do that?" The "we" was deliberate. It was a rope thrown to a drowning boy, and he grabbed it. "Yeah, okay, I can do it. When?" "Now. Text me when you have them." An hour later, my phone buzzed with a series of image files. The quality was poor, Jamie's hands shaking, but the content was devastatingly clear. It wasn't a simple loan agreement. It was a complex, predatory contract from an entity called VS Holdings. The principal was staggering. The interest rate was usurious. The collateral listed not only the house, but in a clause titled Ancillary Assurance, made reference to the sustained and verifiable employment of the primary household administrator, C. Reed, as a material factor in repayment capacity. They had literally put my job stability, my role as family caretaker, into the contract. Victor hadn't been lying. I had been written into the deal as a risk mitigation feature. And at the bottom, my father's shaky signature and a second witness signature I recognized with a jolt of nausea. It was my mother's. She had known. Not the details, perhaps, but she had signed. They had both gambled everything, the house, their future, my autonomy, on Alara's symbolic car. The betrayal was so complete, So profound, it felt like a physical dissolution. I sat on my kitchen floor, the phone glowing in the dim light, and I didn't cry. I just went cold. The last fragile thread of obligation, of familial duty, snapped. They had sold my freedom for a down payment on a car. The moral dilemma evaporated, burned away by a cold, clarifying fury. I would not be Victor's bookkeeper. I would not save them. But I would not let him destroy me either. I looked at the white business card, then I looked at the damning photos on my phone. I had two forms of power now: the evidence of the predatory loan and the fact that Victor believed I was a compliant, guilt-ridden daughter he could manipulate. He wanted the reliable glue? Fine. But he was about to learn that glue, when it hardens, can also trap, and sometimes the most practical thing in the world is to let the whole rotten structure collapse, but on your own terms and from a safe distance. I had 48 hours. It was time to stop reacting and start building a trap of my own.
48 hours. The time stretched before me like a dark corridor, but for the first time I wasn't standing frozen in the middle of it. I was mapping its exits. The cold fury that had replaced my gut-churning guilt was a powerful, focused fuel. They had mortgaged my life. Now I would foreclose on their expectations for good. My first move was not toward Victor Salvatore, but toward the only person I knew who operated in the gray spaces between the law and survival. Margot, my boss. At the design firm, she was a creative director. In her past life, she'd hinted at being something else, someone who knew how to navigate storms without drowning. I knocked on her office door late that evening after everyone had left. "You look like you've chosen a war," she said without preamble, leaning back in her chair and assessing me over her reading glasses. "I have, and I need an intelligence asset, not legal advice, just directional." I laid it out for her in stark, unemotional terms. The loan, the collateral clause, Victor. I showed her the photos from Jamie. She listened, her face a mask of granite. When I finished, she let out a long, low whistle. "They used you as a human cosigner. That's creatively vile." She took off her glasses. "This Victor, he's middle management, a polished thug. The VS Holdings is a shell. The real muscle is behind it, and they don't want a messy scene any more than you do. They want predictable returns or a clean, quiet asset seizure." "How do you know all this?" "I had a brother, Cassandra, a good-hearted idiot who got into similar trouble. I learned the hard way." She folded her hands. "Victor's power is your fear and your family's desperation. He's offering you a job because it's cleaner than breaking kneecaps, and it gives him a permanent hold over a useful person. Once you're in, you're never out. So I say no. And he makes an example of your family. The house is gone, public ruin. Your father might not survive the shame. Is that what you want?" "No," I said, the word sharp. "But I won't be his slave." A slow smile touched Margot's lips. "Good. Then you don't say no. You renegotiate." She outlined a plan. It was audacious, risky, and the only path that didn't end in me in chains or my family on the street. It relied on playing Victor's own game, leveraging appearances, using his assumptions against him. The next evening, using a cheap burner phone, I called the number on the white card. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Reed, I trust you've considered our proposal." "I have," I said, my voice infused with a weary resignation I didn't have to fake. "But I have conditions. I won't do anything illegal. I want a defined term, 1 year of freelance administrative work, 10 hours a week, at a fair market rate. Every penny I earn goes directly to the loan principal, not the interest. And you provide me with a complete, notarized amortization schedule showing the reduction. At the end of the year, we reevaluate." There was a long silence. I could almost hear him recalibrating. I was speaking his language,
Terms, conditions, contracts. I was being the practical, managerial Cassandra he expected, but I was also setting a boundary, nothing illegal, and a time limit. You got a fair market rate applied to principal would be a drop in the bucket on this debt, he said, but his tone was considering, not dismissive. It's a show of good faith from both sides. You get my skills and my compliance. I get a light at the end of the tunnel. And my family's stability, the asset, remains intact because I'm not in a constant state of panic. I let that hang, the implication clear. A stressed out me is a less useful me. Meet me tomorrow. Same place, same time. We'll discuss the first assignment. He hung up. Phase 1. Engaged. He hadn't agreed, but he was negotiating. I had a foothold. The following night, by the river, I got my first assignment. It was, as Margot predicted, benign on the surface, reconciling a set of ledgers for a small, cash-based physical therapy clinic that was, according to Victor, behind on its bookkeeping. The numbers, however, told a different story. The therapy was a front. The ledger was a laundry. My job was to make the inconsistencies look like innocent errors. It was a test. Could I be useful? Could I look the other way? I spent the weekend on it. But I didn't just fix the books. I created a second hidden set of books, a mirror ledger that meticulously documented the original discrepancies and my corrections, a digital insurance policy. I delivered the clean version to Victor on a USB drive at our next meeting. He slid it into his laptop, scanned the files, and gave a nod of approval. Efficient. Clean. See, this is where you belong, in the realm of order. The realm of covering up disorder, you mean, I said quietly. He looked up, that cold smile returning. Semantics. 1 year, you said. We'll see. He handed me an envelope. Your first pay, in cash. As agreed, it will be logged against the principal. It was a pittance, but it was a weapon. I took the cash straight to a safety deposit box I'd rented under a P.O. box, along with a printed copy of my hidden ledger. Every payment, every assignment would be documented there. I was building my own case, not for the police, but for the day I needed to force a stalemate. The weeks bled into a month. I became a ghost in two worlds, the sunny creative space of the design firm by day and the shadowy, number-crunching adjunct to Victor's world by night. I saw my family only through the digital breadcrumbs Jamie would send me, a text about Alara taking a bus to a job interview, a photo of my father sitting listlessly in the garden, a worried note about collectors calling. The house was still standing, but the air inside was toxic with unresolved dread. They were living in the limbo I had created, and for the first time, they were feeling its weight without me there to distribute it. Victor's assignments grew, gradually more complex, edging closer to lines I'd said I wouldn't cross. He was probing, seeing how far the practical daughter would go to protect her family. I used every ounce of my organizational skills to delay, to obfuscate, to create bureaucratic tangles that required more time, all while meticulously documenting every step. My breaking point, and my opportunity, came 8 weeks in. The assignment was a property transfer. The documents were forged, and my job was to use my eye for detail to ensure they would pass a notary's casual glance. This wasn't bookkeeping. This was felony-level fraud. I stood in Victor's makeshift office, a sparse room above a warehouse, holding the folder. I said nothing illegal. This is fraud. It's paperwork, he countered, his patience thinning. Your family's debt is not minor. Your father's health is not robust. The clock is ticking in more ways than one. It was the first direct threat he had uttered since our initial meeting. The veil was slipping. He needed me to get dirty to ensure my permanent compliance. This was the moment. I placed the folder gently on his desk. I'll do it. He looked surprised, then satisfied. The reliable glue was sticking. But, I continued, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, the notary scheduled for this is known to be meticulous. I've done a background check. This was a lie, but one built on his perception of my thoroughness. There's a 70% chance she flags the inconsistencies in the grantor signatures. If that happens, the transaction freezes. It draws attention from the county recorder, and your client is exposed. I paused, letting the risk sink in. We have a better solution. A colleague from my old firm does freelance graphic design. For a fee, he can improve the source documents before they reach the notary. It's more expensive, but it reduces the risk to zero. It's the practical choice. I was offering to expand a criminal conspiracy, but I was framing it as prudent risk management. I was speaking his language perfectly. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Do it. Keep the fees reasonable. Report back. I had just been given a mandate to involve a fictional accomplice and control a budget. It was the opening I needed. Using skills I'd honed for years, making my family's reality look prettier than it was, I created flawless forgeries myself. I didn't involve anyone else. I then presented the improved documents to Victor, along with an inflated invoice from my fictitious graphic designer. He paid it without question, the cash coming from a different, deeper pocket. I logged the fake invoice and the real cash in my hidden ledger. I now had evidence of him directing fraud and moving illicit cash to pay for it. The trap was set. I waited 2 more weeks, letting him grow more confident in my utility. Then I requested a meeting. I wore a wire, a cheap, easily detectable one that Margot had sourced. I didn't need it to be admissible. I needed him to find it. In the warehouse office, I laid out the paperwork for the next assignment, my movements slightly more nervous than usual. As planned, during our conversation, the cheap device slipped from my waistband and clattered onto the concrete floor. The room went dead silent. Victor stared at the device, then at me, his expression hardening into something truly terrifying. "You foolish woman," he hissed, stepping toward me. "It's not for the police," I blurted, backing away, genuine fear in my voice now. "It's for me, to prove to myself I'm not a criminal, to have a record that I was coerced. Please, my family." I let the desperate, guilt-ridden daughter take over, sobbing, crumbling. It was the performance of my life. He believed it. He saw not a threat, but a panicking amateur trying to assuage her own conscience. "Give it to me," he commanded, coldly. I handed it over, weeping. He crushed it under his heel. "That was your one mistake, Cassandra, your one moment of sentimentality. It seems even the practical heart has its weaknesses." He leaned close, his breath on my face. "The next year of your life just got much less pleasant. You will do exactly as I say. No more negotiations. Or I won't just take the house. I'll make sure your brother has an unfortunate accident. Do you understand?" I nodded, trembling, my eyes downcast. He believed he had broken me for good. He had just made a direct, violent threat, witnessed by the very recording device he thought he'd destroyed. But the wire was a decoy. The real audio was being captured by the phone in my purse, the one Margot had configured to transmit live to a secure cloud server. I had what I needed, a recording of him admitting to the coercion, detailing the criminal enterprise, and making a threat of violence. The next day, I didn't go to work. I went to a federal building downtown, not to the police, but to the office of a Federal Bureau investigator named Rosario. I walked in with a folder containing copies of the original loan documents, my hidden ledger, the falsified property transfer, records of the cash payments, and a transcript of the recording. I presented it not as a victim, but as a confidential informant who had infiltrated a predatory lending and money laundering operation. "I want immunity for my cooperation," I stated flatly, "and I want witness protection from my immediate family, not for me, for them. They are unwitting pawns and will be targets for retaliation." The agent, a weary-looking woman named Rosario, scanned the materials. You played a dangerous game, Miss Reed. It was the only game left on the board. It took weeks of tense negotiations. Victor and several members of his network were arrested quietly in a coordinated dawn raid. The loan from VS Holdings was voided as predatory and illegal. The lien on my parents' house dissolved. My father, upon being informed by a stern federal agent that his poor judgment had nearly indentured his daughter to a criminal syndicate, suffered a second, milder attack. The shame finally broke through his desperation. As part of the agreement, my family was given a stark choice: enter a short-term, monitored relocation program for their safety, or decline and face the consequences on their own. They chose the program. They were moved to a small town in another state, into a modest rental. For the first time, they had no one to manage it for them. No glue, just each other and the rubble of their choices. I declined witness protection. I had built my own protection. I had Margot. I had my documentation, and I had proven to myself most of all that I was not just capable of cleaning up messes. I was capable of strategically demolishing the very structures that created them. I stayed in the city. I kept my job. The quiet of my apartment is no longer a burden. It is a throne. I am not the glue. I am the architect. Sometimes, late at night, I think of them. My mother learning to budget on a tight grocery list, my father staring at a blank resume, Alara working a retail job, Jamie finishing high school in a strange town. There is a pang, distant and soft, not guilt, something more like the ache for a story that could have been different, but never was.